Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Many times when you're being asked to solve two-step equations, that is, equations where the variable has two operations done to it, there are many ways to solve this kind of equation. I'll show you one way today. It's called the story method. I'll demonstrate how to do it, and I'll compare it with the usual balance method of solving two-step equations. The basic idea behind the story method is you're trying to tell a story about the variable. What happened to the variable and what was the result? Then, in order to solve that equation, you work backwards from that story by stepping back through the operations and flipping them. I'll give you an example using the first example. 2v minus 6 is equal to 10. So if I were to tell this equation as a story, I'd probably say something like this. Once upon a time, there was a variable called v. V was multiplied by 2. Then it was subtracted by 6. The result of all that was it became 10. The end. So we have a story version of the equation. In order to solve it, we'll start at 10 and work backwards through the story. And every time we see an operation, we'll do the inverse, or we'll do the opposite of that operation instead. So that gives us a way to rewind the story so that we can find out what value the variable was. So let's try it with this one. So if we were telling the story backwards, we will start at 10. The first operation we see going backwards is a subtraction of 6. The inverse of subtracting 6 is adding 6. So I'll put that plus 6. And let's do that right now. 10 plus 6 is 16. Okay. Now we come upon the second operation. It was multiplying by 2. Let's reverse that. Instead of multiplying by 2, let us instead divide by 2. So we'll start with 16 and divide that by 2. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And since after that we end up at v, this must be what v was. So v is equal to 8. Let's give that a check. If v were 8, 8 times 2 is 16, and 16 minus 6 is 10. So it checks out. It turns out that if 2v minus 6 is equal to 10, then v is equal to 8. Let's see another example of that. Let's go to this one. K over 5 plus 3 is equal to 6. Just a note, that fraction bar means to divide. If I were telling a story about this variable, k, it would probably sound something like this. Once upon a time, there was a variable called k. It got divided by 5. Then it was added to 3. The result of all this was it became 6. The end. All right, so in order to rewind the story, we will start at 6 and then flip all of these operations. So let's start going backward. We'll start with 6. And the first operation we see when going backwards is this adding 3. So let's flip it. Instead of adding 3, let's subtract 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. So now this is the number that we're going to use in order to operate with the opposite of this operation. So the next one is dividing by 5. Instead of dividing by 5, though, we'll do the opposite of that, which is to multiply by 5. So that's the next operation, times 5. 3 times 5 is 15. Since after this we end up at k, we reason that k must be equal to 15. Let's give that a check. If k were 15, 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 3 plus 3 is 6. Therefore, it's true that if k divided by 5 plus 3 is equal to 6, then k is equal to 15. Now you might be wondering, how does this compare to the original method or the balance method that's usually shown to students in many math textbooks? Well, we can do them side by side. So let's see what these would be, what the solutions would be using the balance method. Remember that in the balance method, we're treating the equation as a balance beam, or like a weighing scale. And whatever we do on one side must also be done on the other. So if you're going to subtract 6 on one side, then you need to subtract 6 on the other side as well. Let's do that for this problem. 2v minus 6 is equal to 10. Notice that we were going to ask the same questions. For example, we noticed that we're subtracting 6. In order to get rid of that, we must add 6, because negative 6 plus 6 is 0. So on the left side of the equation, we're going to add 6. But since we did that to the left side, we must also do that to the right side. So add 6 as well. 10 plus 6 is 16. And then everything that survives from the first line is just 2v. Now, to get rid of multiplying by 2, we need to divide by 2. So we divide by 2 on the left side. However, since we did it to the left, we must also do it to the right. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that doesn't need to be written down. So v is equal to 16 divided by 2, or 8. Notice that our answers are the same. Okay, let's see what would work on the second equation. So k divided by 5 plus 3 is equal to 6. All right, so I noticed that they added 3. So in order to get rid of adding 3, we must subtract 3. But because we subtracted 3 on the left side, we must also subtract 3 on the right side. This leads to positive 3 and negative 3 canceling out, because that's 0. So we don't need to write it anymore. And we'll have k divided by 5 is equal to the answer to 6 minus 3, which is 3. Then, k is being divided by 5. In order to get rid of a division of 5, we need to multiply by 5. So let's multiply this by 5. But since we did it to the left side, we must also do it to the right side. So we also need to multiply 3 by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, so we don't need to write that down anymore. And all we have left is k. And k is equal to the answer to 3 times 5, which is 15. Notice that the answers are the same. And I also want to point out that not only are the answers the same, the operations that we did are the same as well. So if you go over here, we said 6 minus 3 is 3, and 3 times 5 is 15. Those numbers should look familiar because that is exactly what we did on the backwards way and in the story mode, right? 6 minus 3 equals 3, and 3 times 5 equals 15. If we look at the other example, on the balance method, we had to add 10 plus 6 to get 16, and then divide 16 by 2 to get 8. Compare that to what we did on the story mode. 10 plus 6 equals 16, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. So not only are the answers the same, the actual operations you needed to do were also the same. So this is an example of uh, two techniques where the answers and the operations are the same, but the the way to think about them is different. So the main difference is what your mind is bringing to mind. In the story mode, you're thinking of something going forward, and the solution is something going backward. But in the balance beam mode, you're thinking of a balance beam where if you do something to the left side, you must also do it on the right side in order for the equation to stay true, in order for the equation to stay equal. So I hope this was a good demonstration or an understandable demonstration of the story method. If you have any questions about this method, you know how to reach me, or you can leave a comment at this video. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day, and God bless all of you.